welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What do they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And here we are, the last week of August, as we continue to talk about the HR Southwest Conference in our Speaker Spotlight series. And today, my goodness, we have another special guest. His name is Eric M. Bailey. He's the president of Bailey Strategic Innovation Group, BSIG. He's a consultant, and he's also a speaker at this year's 2022 the HR Southwest Conference coming up in October. A couple other notes. He's a best-selling author of The Cure for Stupidity. I think we're going to be talking about that today. He's also a Diversity Leader of the Year, award-winning virtual keynote speaker, 40 Under 40, board member of YMCA. And I'm sure there's a lot more on this list that I have not even talked about. But Eric, hey, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you, Eric. And we're going to talk about the HR Southwest Conference because you're going to be one of our speakers this year. Have you ever spoke at the HR Southwest Conference before?
I did. I spoke last year. It was my first time actually doing another live after the whole pandemic thing. So it was wonderful to get out there to HR Southwest.
Oh, man, fantastic. Looking forward to another big year here in Fort Worth, Texas. And we're going to talk about your session. And your session is The Cure for Stupidity, using brain science to explain and understand irrational behavior. And I'm excited to get in this conversation. But before we do, I would love to know, Eric, your story. Share the Eric M. Bailey story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into this world of leadership and speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally from Seattle, Washington area. And I migrated down to Phoenix, Arizona, where I live now. Of course, you couldn't get anything different than Seattle, than Phoenix, from the raining every day to the hot and sunny every day. But came down here to run track at Arizona State University. And you know what happens? I got a mortgage, I got a wife, and all of a sudden I'm here for 20 years. So I got into this because I did a lot of customer service training. In my very first job, I was kind of in a customer service type job, and the guy who owned the company said, "Hey, why don't you try to be a manager?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll do that." College kid, like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I kind of stepped into this management role, and he's like, "Hey, I need someone to do the training." I'm like, "I'll do it. I've gone to training before. I could figure this out." So I kind of put my own spin on training, and I found that I really liked doing it. And then, like every job that I had going, I was just kind of the de facto trainer for my peers and other folks. And then I got this opportunity to kind of step into a consulting role doing international change management consulting with the firm out of Boston, and did that for a year. And after that, I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is what I'm meant to do. So my wife and I, we started a company 6 years ago, and we've been growing like crazy ever since. And right now, because of the work we do in brain science, a lot of people are asking us to speak. So I'd say now about probably 90% of my time now is spent on stages, doing work, training people, teaching, and doing keynotes.
That is absolutely fantastic. Little did you know, when you raised your hand to say, "Hey, I'll do it," where it was going to lead you. And by the way, for those of you listening, this is also, of course, available on YouTube. But for those of you listening, Eric has a sign right behind him. And he says, "Believe that there is goodness in the world, in the people of the world." And I got to tell you, it's colorful. It's got some red and orange and yellow and green and blue. It's got my attention. And as you're speaking, I'm sitting there going, "Man, this guy, like, he radiates positivity." Where'd that come from?
I've always been a happy kid, like but my mom tells me stories about how I was just the one to make people feel good, feel better. It's just one thing I learned. So I'm a former HR guy. I'm a recovering HR guy, right? I spent many time in HR. In HR, we spend so many times going to terrible presentations. And I realized in going to all of these awful presentations that if I'm going to be on stage or I'm going to be in front of people training, that I want to be able to connect with them personally so that they will want to apply whatever I'm talking about to their world. And if we don't make that connection, it will be another waste of time. And so I learned how to be very authentic.
Mhm.
And I'm a happy guy, and so I'm happy on stage. If I'm having a hard time or I'm struggling, I will struggle on stage, and I'll let
Mhm.
people know, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Um, and that has just made it so much easier for me. Like I don't need to play a role. I don't need to turn it on or off. It's just me, and you're gonna get all of me. And if I'm in a manic mood, you're gonna get all of that too. But it helps me connect with people through my
Mhm.
authenticity. And so the folks who can't see the sign, the colorful parts actually kind of carve out more of the word. And so the whole sign says believe that there's goodness in the people of the world, but the colorful part says be the good in the world. And
Oh,
that's really what kind of defines me, is in this space, what can I do for the world?
man, I got to tell you right now, I've got chills. That is absolutely fantastic. Next week after this show, next week's Felicia Taylor, and she's also speaking about the candidate experience. And as you
Mm.
talk about this, I think about the word experience. Like you deliver an experience. I mean, I have not seen you speak, but I can feel there's going to be an experience. And one of the things I interviewed a few weeks ago, the conference director, Shirley Johnson, and she talked about this year, HR Southwest Conference is going to focus on the attendee experience. So, like, everybody's like waiting to see what that's going to look like. So, I think that would be pretty important for you about that attendee experience when you're speaking, right?
100%, 100%. We don't have a very long time. Typically, when I like to speak, I'll speak for 90 minutes, 2 hours, because there's just so much energy and so much that I want to get done. Um, and so as I carve out a session like I am doing for HR Southwest, it is 100% interactive. And so let's say we have 50, 100, 150, 300 people in the room. We're all going to be going through this same experience in our own ways. And then what happens, the way that I do it, because I kind of leverage the brain science, the psychology, the neuroscience, what happens is after the session, people are still thinking about all that happened in the session, and they can start applying it to their world right away.
Mm,
So like it becomes this more like ethereal experience than just kind of sitting in and taking
mm.
some notes.
Well, let's talk about the HR Southwest Conference coming up October the 16th through the 19th in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm going to put a link to the show notes. Again, you're going to be talking about the cure for stupidity, use brain science to explain and understand irrational behavior. And of course, the theme this year is learn, network, and grow. I would love to hear, you wrote a book. Talk a little bit about how this topic came up and why this is important to you.
Oh, absolutely. This is, in my humble opinion, this is probably the most important topic in our world right now, right? So we are effectively losing the ability to communicate with one another. You figure, how many times do we judge the other driver in the lane next to us because they cut us off, or they're texting and driving, oh, they're so stupid or whatever, and then we go and we do the same thing, right? We'll accidentally cut somebody off. Oh, I'm so sorry. Or we're texting and driving. I just got to do this one thing really quickly. Like we're really good at justifying our own behaviors and coming down pretty harshly on other people's behaviors.
Mm,
And when you think about how that applies, in our interconnectivity, looking at Congress, looking at our coworkers, looking at our family members, like we're growing these really huge divides right now, and it usually centers around some judgment of their stupidity, right?
mm,
They're an idiot, they're stupid, they can't, why
mm,
are they so stupid? Well, how could they not figure this is common sense, everyone know, right? And all of that, the baseline is that we're judging them as stupid.
mm,
And what I realize is that there are some very concrete, understandable brain science principles that can justify, rationalize, or otherwise explain all of those behaviors. And when you can be very specific, oh, they did this because of this,
mm,
they're not stupid anymore. They're just human. And they're
mm,
just a human interacting in a different way than we would. And what it does, it relieves our pressure. Our frustration goes away. Or it doesn't change them, but then our experience of life is less frustrating. And we can engage with them differently again. And that's, I think, if we can figure that out,
Mm.
right? All of these problems we're seeing are solved, all of them.
Yeah, I got to tell you, people listening right now, they're like, I guarantee they're like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. I wrote a book called Find Your Lane, and a lady, Letty, said, hey, you need to write a book called Stay in Your Lane. So like, get in your lane, stay in your lane. I love everything you're talking about, and as you're talking about that, for me, because I have not done the research and understand that, I'm anxious to attend your session. I look at that as like perspective, right? And so many times, whenever someone is driving, as you talk about this, I think about the student driver. The
Yes.
student driver has a sign. So the sign on the car says student driver. So immediately I'm like, hey, you know what? It's going to be slow. He's going to stop, whatever that case may be. I can make the decision if I go around him or whatever. But most people don't have that sign on their car, do they?
Right. And that's exactly it. And you think about your personal experience. So let's say that the student driver doesn't have the sign, and you're on the freeway and they're going 40 miles an hour, like honking the horn. You're so frustrated. But same situation, but there is a sign, right? The only thing different is just your understanding of what's happening in that car. And there's no frustration, there's no stress. You go around them, you wave, you think, oh, that's so cute, right? And the situation is exactly the same. The behavior is exactly the same, but your experience is different. And so one of the things that I talk about a lot is, back on the road, I saw someone, literally, I saw someone doing a FaceTime video chat while driving on the freeway. Right. And so my thought is, you're endangering my family, but they really weren't. They were driving straight. Like there was no swerving or anything. But I'm like, they're endangering my family. This is horrible. Wow, what a terrible person. You're a horrible human being. Right. And I'm putting all these character judgments on this person. And then my wife, who's read my book and is the best one to point the things back at me, she said, well, what if that woman is video chatting with her husband who's deployed in Afghanistan, and this is the only chance she has to video chat with him? And I'm like, oh, I don't know whether or not that's true.
Yeah.
But what it does is, as soon as I considered that as a possibility, all of my frustration went away, all of my stress went away, and I went on with my life. Right. But how many times do we hold on to these things because we want to be in the frustration, we want to be mad, but then we realize all the physical reactions that happen after being frustrated for our whole lives, right?
Man,
So
as you were telling that story, I was sitting there thinking, or it could be so many different things. What if it's a mom talking to a daughter? Her daughter's been in an accident or in trouble, and she's trying to talk her through that. Like there could be so many scenarios. All of a sudden, you're like,
a million different things.
Just changes your whole. Oh man, that's so good. So you said, as we got on here, you said probably one of the most important topics we have today. And I want to dive into that just for a second. I mean, you just now talked about, we just talked about the scenario there, but why did you say that? Why is that important for people listening right now? People that are planning on attending the conference, they're going to go to your session. Why is that important for them to hear this message?
That's a great question. There's a couple of reasons for that. So as HR professionals, we know from research that 3 of the top 5 reasons people don't like their jobs. Now, I'm not talking about, the study of why people leave. They leave because of a bad boss or whatever. 3 of the top 5 reasons people don't like their jobs, they're in their job, but the worst part about the job, are all about communication. People don't communicate, the company doesn't communicate, my team members don't communicate, right? Expectations are cannot communicate. All these things are around communication. And what happens, and we see this kind of echoing outside of the work world, we see these fissures showing up. And because people aren't communicating well, we start to split. And then because of that split, we say, you know what, it's not even worth my time or energy to acknowledge you anymore. And we split farther apart. You see this with political parties. You see this with family members that separate. You see with, I don't even know why I'm mad at you anymore, but I'm mad for 10 years, right? And these things are 100% resolvable issues. I'm actually going tomorrow to go speak with the National Conference of State Legislators, and they understand that communication is the reason we're splitting up. Because
Mhm.
what happens if people have a different, let's say politics, let's say someone has a different political point of view than you
Yeah.
do, like our first thought is judging, there must be something wrong with you. I am rational. I
Mhm.
see things so clearly. Here's
Mhm.
all the reasons I'm correct. And if you disagree, you must be wrong. You must be an idiot, right? If you can't see
Mhm.
all of these things laid out. And what that does is, having a difference of opinion is totally fine,
Mhm.
right? In fact, we actually thrive when we have difference of opinion. But it's the character judgment that causes the rift. If I call you stupid, now you're offended and you're going to call me stupid like we're in kindergarten, right? And like, oh, how dare you call me this, right? So we split up. And what happens in our organizations is people end up more lonely. There's
Mhm.
research that shows that we are the most lonely we have ever been as a society, a working society. And it's not just because of the pandemic, right? It's even before that started. We are the least comfortable at work. We have the fewest friends at work that we've ever had
Mhm.
before. Like all of these things, we're less collaborative, and all of these things really play out because we don't have the tools to engage each other when we disagree, when we don't understand each other. And that's what I spent all this time and research doing, is what are the tools that people can use to re-engage.
So good, so good. I think again, people are going to resonate with this message. I was actually thinking about a book I read by Bob Chapman called Everybody Matters. And in that
Yes.
book, he talks about 88% of the people in the workforce don't feel like they're valued or heard, and they feel isolated. And as a matter of fact, Sherm actually came out with some statistics not too long ago. It said, when it was around the Great Resignation, right? The percentage of people that are leaving the workforce, but the one statistic it talked about was it was like 30% or more when their friends left the workforce, they feel isolated. So now what you're talking about is so important. Let me ask you this: couple of I don't want you to share your whole presentation, Eric. I mean, nobody's going to go to your session. Share a couple of tips, a couple of like things that you are going to talk about that people will find helpful in your session.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my book, I have 22 principles. I call them the principles of human understanding.
Okay.
And there's 22 principles, and obviously we're not going to go through all 22 of them in the session, but we're going to hit probably 4 of them.
Okay.
And the first one is the most important. It's called the illusion of certainty. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now
Okay.
because you got to
All
get to
right.
the session.
Sure.
But probably the most important one that we're going to address is called perception is more important than reality.
Ooh.
And what I do first and foremost is I draw the distinction, the clear distinction between perception and reality. And we have this idea that perception equals reality.
Mm,
It doesn't. Perception
mm,
does not equal reality, right? Perception is the way in which we interpret the world, whereas reality is the way the world actually exists. And
mm,
sometimes they match, for sure. More often than not, they don't match.
mm,
And the interesting thing is you and I will perceive things differently. I mean,
mm.
even if you look at somebody who is colorblind, right? They obviously are perceiving the world differently than someone who's not colorblind. Just I'm at the example with the woman video chatting in the car. Like my
Right.
perception is that she's a horrible person. I make all these judgments based on that. All my wife had to do was offer a different context, and my perception changed. Reality was the same thing. The woman's driving down the
Mm,
road on a video, but my perception changed and I felt better. All right. And so this idea of perception versus reality, I actually go into some really cool examples, some experiential examples
mm,
of how that doesn't jibe. And then how can we apply that to work? And how do we typically apply that even though we don't know it? And those are some of the most powerful tools. So what happens is people will take those away. They'll be able to apply it to their own leadership. They'll be able to apply it to their own HR experience. They'll be able to apply it to their own family relationships. I had one woman who's seen me speak 2 times. The second time, she came up to me before the session started. She said, "Oh my God, you saved my marriage." And I'm
ah.
like, I'm not doing marriage counseling when I talk about relationships. She's like, no, no, no. You talked about this thing about perception of reality. And I realized that every time I get into a debate with my spouse, I'm trying to tell them why they're wrong.
Hmm.
And instead, I thought about perception, reality. They may have a different perception. And she said, I listened to my spouse for the first time ever.
Mm.
And I realized what they perceive, what he perceived. And I'm like, oh, that's it. That's it. She's like, my relationship has completely changed with him. And it was really cool because she's like, now, because I got curious about his perception, now he's curious about mine. And now we're having these really interesting conversations that we've never had before. And I'm like, that's it. That's it. That's everything, right?
I
If we
love
could do
that.
that, that's everything.
I love that. You know, I often hear feedback is a gift. What an incredible gift for you to hear that feedback, which probably fueled you to share the message even more, right? I mean, not just in the workplace. All of a sudden, it's at the house, in the home.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
man, that is so good. Oh my goodness. This is going to be so good. You need to definitely sign up for the HR Southwest Conference. And once you get registered, I'll put the show notes. I'll put the link in the show notes. Be sure and attend Eric his session. It's going to be so good. Hey, so you just shared something that this lady shared. I mean, that's and I'm going to be speaking as well. I'm going to be talking about energizing HR and bringing energy in the workplace. I'm super excited about that. But the best part for me is that part where people come up after the session and they talk to the speakers. And I'm just curious, like, do you ever think about at the end of the session, once everybody has, gone through the session, they've taken all these notes, right? They're ready to go apply it, but yet they come up to you. What do you hope they share with you, Eric?
It's funny. My best conversations after sessions are questions, right? So
Mm,
someone will come up to me and say, I really enjoyed this thing you said, but I'm dealing with this.
mm,
And after HR conferences, especially, people say, I've got this leader who is blank, 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 blank. What do you think I should do? Like, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know. I can't figure out how to apply that because this situation seems so much harder than what you explained. And so, what I get to do in that situation is I get to say, hey, here's all the things that I'm talking about. And
mm,
here's all the ways that I would apply it in your situation. And it's the same things, right? It's no more complex when dealing with a complex issue because all the research and all the work that I've done, I try to distill it down to the basic human universal elements. And so it applies broadly. And so it seems like it should be too easy, but as you start working through these things, and so people say, "Oh my God, I never thought about doing it that way.
mm.
I never thought it was as simple as you're talking about." And oh, I see it now. And then people get super jazzed at that. Like you'd see like their shoulders go down, right? They start smiling, they start to bounce a little in their feet. And I can tell like they're gonna go right now and have a phone call. Like they're gonna go right now and write an email because they're like, they've been struggling with this thing for in some cases years. I've had some HR managers come and say, I've been struggling with this for years. And now they feel like they've kind of finally unraveled and now they can
Mm.
deal with it and they have the confidence to do so.
Man, oh man, what a gift. Questions following the session. That's when you know, hey, this is where I want to be. That's when you know, hey, I'm in my lane, helping people with their questions. Hey, so this is Eric M. Bailey. He's the author of The Cure for Stupidity. He's going to be talking about some of the principles from his book, using brain science to explain and understand irrational behavior. It's going to be fantastic. October the 16th through the 19th in Fort Worth, Texas. Again, I'll put the link in the show notes. It's going to be a lot of fun. Be sure and sign up for Eric's session. You're going to really enjoy that. I'm looking forward to it as well. Hey, Eric, I want to ask you a quick question before we kind of wrap up with some fun questions. And a question I always like to ask leaders, because I feel like we always learn from leaders that they were just given some advice sometime during their career. Maybe it was early in their career, maybe it was mid-career. They've been given some advice. It was so good. They just find themselves sharing it with others and finding it very helpful. Any advice you ever received
Yes.
in your career that you find yourself sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier my first boss who kind of gave me hey, do you want to be a manager? I was
Yeah.
like, yeah. I mean, this was I was working at the zoo, it was the Phoenix Zoo, and it was the gentleman who owned the concessions company.
Okay.
So literally, I'm popping kettle corn at the zoo in 115-degree heat in Phoenix, right in the middle of summer. But he kind of has me start doing this management training with him, and so I'm just shadowing him, walking around with him, learning how to do all the logistics stuff, all the management stuff. And he gets this call from one of our employees, and it's already 5 minutes after her shift was supposed to start, so like we're like covering her spot for her. And he says, hey, are you okay? And she said, yeah, and employee excuses, right? Oh, but the bus or my alarm or my phone or whatever. He's like, hey, it's okay, just come on in, take your time. And he hangs up with her. He's super calm, and I'm like, what are you, why, like, she's late already, why are you so calm? You're supposed to start discipline, right? Let her know, like, correct this behavior. And he said, hey, she already feels bad, she knows that,
Mhm.
and she's now on her way to work. If I put any kind of fear into her, she might rush to get to work, putting herself in a more dangerous situation, right? And I don't need, she's going to be here anyway within the next, 15 minutes. It's either 12 minutes or 15 minutes. And if she's speeding on the freeway, she might get into an accident. I would rather her get here safely and then have a conversation with her. And I sat there and I really struggled with that because every other, parent, boss, any authority that I knew, like, it was their job to like let the employee know they messed up. And she came in and she's like, I'm so sorry. Thank you. And I'm like, I've never heard an employee come in late and say thank you before. And when I kind of debriefed it with him afterwards, he said, she learned more on that drive into work where I didn't yell at her than
Mm.
she ever would have if I did. And I'm like, geez Louise. And so what I learned from that is, we have this idea that as authority figures or disciplinary figures, it's our job to make them know they're wrong. What I realize is they already know they're wrong.
Yeah.
They already know that. And if we can just guide them in the right direction, most often they will adore us as humans more and want to do more for us as humans if we're kind to them in that moment. And that's something, it's really stuck with me, right? It's like we don't have to be mean bosses. We don't have to be, and if someone's having a lot of like chronic issues, like obviously that's a different story. But this one woman who had one off late because XYZ, something out of her control, right? Coming down on her was not the right thing, and it would not have yielded the results that we ended up getting.
Man, I gotta tell you, I got chills here. That calmed me. That story you just shared, that is so good. And I know that people listening right now, that's going to help someone. So I appreciate you sharing that story. So good, Eric. I appreciate it so much. Hey, let's shift over to the last part of the show. It's called "It's Time to Accelerate." Uh, hey, you speak all over. You've been to Fort Worth. You got a favorite city that you have visited or that you like to go to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love exploring new cities.
Okay.
I think at this point, speaking of, I've flown the equivalent of circumnavigating the Earth about 10 times now. I love St. Louis. St. Louis is one of
Mm.
my favorite cities. I got my master's degree there, and I'm actually speaking at Missouri SHRM later this week. Um, and I'm really excited about that. But I love speaking in Missouri. I've got a couple conferences in Orlando coming up next month, and Orlando's a really, really fun city. However, when I mentioned I did my consulting with the international change management firm, and one of the organizations we worked at was in Dallas, at Fort Worth, actually. And so I actually found quite a bit of joy every time I'd fly into Fort Worth, because coming from Phoenix, it's like a if Phoenix were the oven. Fort Worth is like opening the oven and getting a hug at the same time, right? Because you got, right, the heat, a little bit more humidity, but it's really fun. So I love Fort Worth as well. So I'm excited to come back.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Sundance Square, again, HR Southwest Conference coming up. Hey, let me ask you this, and this is my final question, Eric, and it's I don't know, it's a question I just enjoy hearing perspective. We talked about perspective, and that is Eric M. Bailey's 10 years older, and he's knocking at your front door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
He's going to tell me, keep going.
Mm,
So every leader has this moment where we feel like, I'm doing some good work.
mm,
Can I keep it up? Right. So we're kind of balancing our energy versus our passion all the time. And one of the things that I'm noticing now, kind of the hints of,
mm,
are that the impact of my work is making a real difference for people's lives.
mm,
And so, my wife and I, we own the business together for the last 6-7 years, and we're always trying to figure out, like, how much more should we give to this? Should we keep going or should start pulling back? And what I'm realizing, what I hope that I will have realized in 10 years, is that all of the effort that we're putting out now, all of the minds that we're changing, the people that we're lifting up, they're going to have some peace and some lasting change. They'll be able to resolve some things that they've never been able to resolve.
mm,
We'll be able to make this mark and bring the world back together just a little bit.
mm.
And that might be the thing that maybe saves relationships, maybe saves some companies, saves some lives. And if I keep going, that's what I hope to hear from my 10-year older self.
Well, you're definitely be the good in the world. You definitely live that. As you share that, I think about like a football coach or a teacher or a manager, how they are helping people early on, and they won't really see the results until later in life. But you're hopeful that you can just continue to be that good, so they can be the good, so they can be the good, and then they come back years later and share how you were impactful in that. I love that, Eric. This has been absolutely a treat. That's a wise 10 years older Eric and Bailey for sure. I love that. Excited to have you this year at the HR Southwest Conference again, October the 16th through the 19th in Fort Worth, Texas. I'll put a link in the show notes. Be sure and get registered, and then of course attend Eric's session. You're going to really, really enjoy this. The Cure for Stupidity. I am excited about this. I'm energized about this. Eric, let me ask you, if someone, they heard, they're hearing this session, they're like, man, I don't want to wait to connect with Eric. I want to go ahead and connect with him now. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So you can reach me at my website, ericmbailey.com, M as in Michael. Or you can reach me on the socials, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. I don't use Twitter very much, but I have one. I think I'm supposed to have one. But most active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So feel free to reach out. Just search for Eric M. Bailey. The reason I have the M in there is there's another Black male speaker about my age, former athlete, and his name is Eric Bailey. He got started before I did, but he's based in Australia. And so if you search for Eric Bailey, you might find him. We're actually good friends. We've connected over the years.
That's awesome.
But when I wrote my book, I had to put the M in there so that people knew me from him. So Eric M. Bailey.
You're definitely driving in the leadership lane. I appreciate you coming on the show, sharing perspective. I can't wait to see you, meet you, and attend your session at the conference. And I guarantee there's some people listening today that are thinking, man, I'm going to be attending that session. So again, I appreciate you, and just can't wait to share this message, my friend.
All right. I'll see you in Texas.
Awesome. Okay. See you soon, man.
Bye.